Lyneham as such, and Bradenstoke in particular, must have, I mean, it goes back centuries. The history of this little sort of sector of Lyneham is unique.
I'd done my national service in the late 50s. I'd never heard of Lyneham, and I arrived at Dauncey late at night, about 11 o'clock at night, and I happened to say to a villager there, could you tell me where Lyneham is, how far is it? Just up the hill, he said.
Everybody knew one another in Lyneham then. We had the village gossips.
Well, we lived up by the old abbey till I was about 13. I moved down the village then. Went to school in the village the whole time. My dad worked on the camp most of his life.
It stands on a windy hill and has views right across both the Dauncey and Avon Vales in North Wiltshire. For 70-odd years it's played host to one of the largest Royal Air Force stations in the country. It's where I was born and brought up, and is about to experience its biggest change since the 1930s. However, Lyneham was a village long before the RAF ever existed. But if you want to delve back into its ancient history, then you really need to look at the neighbouring village of Bradenstoke. This was once a medieval market town, which grew out of the very ancient settlement known as Clack. Bradenstoke once had an Augustinian priory, or Bradenstoke Abbey, as it was more commonly known. The monks from there were the first priests to administer services at St Michael and All Angels Church in Lyneham. That church is a fine old building, and thought to date back to the year 1139. It's where my mother and father met, were married, and I was baptised. It was in St Michael's that I met Verger Barbara Taylor, or Babs to all who know her.
It was linked with Bradenstoke Abbey because they was priests designated to take services here from Bradenstoke Abbey. I mean, I say we're the older church. You know, we're older than Bradenstoke, St Mary's. The Abbey sort of looked after the parish church here, and there was a lot of connections.
Lots of connections there were. For many years, Anne Hall has lived in Lyneham, but she was brought up at Fern Farm in Bradenstoke, the daughter of the Garlick family. She herself has good reason to remember well the former abbey.
Yes, the abbey it's fallen to pieces now, but it was a sort of centre of Bradenstoke at that time. Originally it was an abbey, yes, and then it became a large home, and my mother lived there with the family, more or less running the place, so she stayed on until she herself married, you see.
All that remains of it is one very badly decaying tower and a part of the crypt. It stands just at the back of Abbey Farm, right at the very top of Bradenstoke village, where there's a dead end. It was nearby that Bill Wheeler lived as a young boy. He has many memories and a very large collection of photographs, particularly of Bradenstoke Abbey. Some amazing photographs that I've never seen before, both the outside and the inside. It was like a stately home inside, wasn't it?
Yes, must have been, yes.
Quite amazing.
Really smart, yes.
How have you come by all these photographs? You just collected them?
Over the years, I bought some of them at antique shows and things, and had some of them given to me and copied. But my grant was a head carter at the Abbey, looking after all the horses.
But the story of Bradenstoke Abbey is a tragic one. In the 1930s, the American newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst bought it and demolished it, with the intention of reconstructing it at his college in the United States. Questions were asked in Parliament, and local people, not least Anne Hall's mother, were furious.
Well, she was very disgusted indeed that it should have been destroyed, yes. Very. Some parts of it are various places in the world. One fireplace is in an island miles away, the other side of the world, and one of my daughters went there once and saw this Bradenstoke fireplace, but had no idea it was anything. It had actually come from Bradenstoke at the time. She caught up on it afterwards.
Some of it he took to Wales, and boxed up the tithe barn and took it to America, and it's still there now, I think, in crates.
Well, at the farm at Melksham, I'm led to believe that I've got the keystone of Bradenstoke Abbey.
Neil Ludlow. He's the son of the late Herbert Ludlow, who once ran Fern Farm where Anne Hall was brought up. The farmhouse itself is now surrounded by modern houses known as Herbert Ludlow Gardens.
It's a triangular stone, about 3 foot high, with a diamond window in the middle. I think it's probably one of the last pieces in Wiltshire. The rest has gone away. Well, Fern Farm was going to be developed, and they were going to call it the Poplars, but they had to cut down a fair few trees. So I think the few villagers didn't like the name Poplars, so they named it after my father.
So, out of the abbey and manor of Bradenstoke came the village of Lyneham, thought to get its name from the linen flax being grown in the surrounding fields. Originally Lynenham, eventually LYNEHAM, becoming what it is now. But although St Michael and All Angels Church is itself ancient, Verger Babs Taylor feels it goes back further.
A few years ago, I digged a cremation plots, and I was digging down and I couldn't get more than a spade depth. And I come across what I think was foundations of an earlier church. So I reckon this is later and an earlier church built. So we don't really know.
If the very large and extremely ancient yew tree that stands right outside St Michael's south door could talk, it might well have all the answers.
Between 11 and 1500 years old. Back in about 3 or 4 years ago, when we had the heavy snow and ice and snow, the middle section of it got broken, but it has regenerated itself.
It's an amazing tree.
And they're amazing trees. With one out the back, out the the west door, there is got struck by lightning, and there's a big hole in that, and that is still standing.
Lyneham village is really made up of 3 main areas. Barrow End, which is near the turning that takes you to Bradenstoke at the northern end, Church End in the south of Lyneham, and the village green that really links the 2 areas. The green itself has changed very little over the years, despite the fact that the busy A3102 passes through. It plays host to a petrol station, St Andrew's Chapel, the White Hart, that's the first of Lyneham's 2 pubs, and the village hall, which was donated in the 1930s by Major Gerard Buxton from nearby Tockenham Manor. Still living in the cottage where he was born on the green is Godfrey Godwin.
Well, there was a chestnut tree on the Carn Road, and it was virtually a T-junction then, and that's all gone now. And there was an elm tree out on the green just opposite that, which when Ray Cole was working at Dauncey and he used to go home on his motorbike, his footrest used to hit the ground every time.
Godfrey has followed very much in his late father Francis's footsteps when it comes to St Michael's Parish Church.
He was in the choir from a young lad and on the PCC for many years, and also bell ringer. He was tower captain for a few years as well. And I carried on the tradition. I'm a ringer and in the choir, and for my sins I'm on the PCC now.
Chuck Taylor and I share many memories. We were brought up opposite each other at St Michael's Close, just off the Chippenham Road. He was actually born on the green, and to this day still holds ancient rights when it comes to that particular part of the village.
I'm one of 2 commoners, which means that we can graze cattle and horses on the green without a licence.
There have always been a lot of trees on Lyneham Green. When I was a small boy, I remember playing around them when visiting my grandparents, George and Elizabeth Amore. They were market gardeners who lived and worked at a small cottage just opposite Pound Close. It's now the home of Ray Cole, who moved in when my grandmother moved out.
Well, you could never see much of it, but basically all I remember about this place is your granddad out on the green with a cow. Well, it was very quaint, 2 rooms, it had no electric, water or sewer, and it had a well, and of course when I bought it, the garden was all overgrown, and well, that's it basically. You couldn't see the house hardly for all the overgrown trees.
Ray claims to be the oldest man that was actually born in Lyneham and who still lives there. but he's just one of many village characters who've never strayed from its parochial roots. Bill Hancock is a familiar villager who still lives next to the grey stone cottage that he and his family before him lived in and worked at.
Originally, my grandfather came to Lyneham when he married in 1895, and he had the grocery shop, his master grocer, and it was a proper grocery shop with the shelves with the drawers with spices and all this sort of thing in. But unfortunately, he died in 1900, and my grandmother was left with the two small children. My father was 5 years old, and his sister, Mrs. Goff, she was 3. And she did carry on the business and with the grocery right up till 1939, really, when she died. Then my father started the cycles and general engineering and hire cars about 1935, and that we built up on that.
Although it's always been primarily a farming community, it's always had a mixture of businesses in and around it before and during the presence of the RAF base. At one time, the White Hart, just off the green on the Chippenham Road, was its only public house, until, that is, the 1960s. Going back to your family home and the shop and everything, opposite is the very well-known Mallard Public House, but before that was a butcher's shop, wasn't it?
That's what it was built as, yes. The juries had that built, yes. And then when they gave it up, it was turned into the Mallard, the pub.
Godfrey Godwin's cottage on the village green is sandwiched between the petrol station in one direction and what is now the Wiltshire Car Centre, which for many years was Wilmot's garage. But Godfrey has good reason to remember what the place originally was.
It was a timber yard which my family owned, 3 or 4 cousins, and that shut up in 1959 because 2 of the cousins out of the 3 wanted to set up and retire. Well, one didn't retire. He went to work in the sawmills at Swindon Railway Works.
And a little bit further on is a slightly separate garage now, Sawmills Garage, which is obviously named after the timber yard.
Yeah, well the part of that Sawmills Garage, the main big building, was the hay barn when the timber yard had horses. That was so about 59, and after that, my father and me went to try the pigs and chickens there, but that didn't work out. And then we went our separate ways. I've done a bit in the building trade for a couple of years before working in the garage trade for 40 odd years.
The garage in question was G&K Barnes at Dauncey. Eventually they took over the premises to the other side of Godfrey's cottage, which is now the petrol station, and originally that was Edmund's garage, with a history of its own.
Well, there was a blacksmith shop and that in there then, and they used to repair a lot of farmyard implements, tractors and all that.
Living in a delightful listed thatched cottage on the green not too far from the village hall is Diana Hamlin, MBE. She's lived in Lyneham for around 50 years, and her home too has a story to tell when it comes to Lynham's village enterprises. This is quite historic itself, it says. I understand it was a cafe at one time.
Yes, it was. In fact, when we came here to live, under the staircase, there was still the signs that said, Lion's Tea, and then there was the menu on the wall, baked beans, 9p, sausage and chips, shilling, and all sorts of things. And it was that sort of historical side of the house that appealed to us, really.
Industries and businesses have come and gone in Lyneham, but with the very real threat of a Second World War on the horizon, the village's biggest change was to happen in the late 1930s. My own maternal grandfather, George Amor, went for a walk across the fields one day, heading towards the nearby hamlet of Goatacre. He came across 2 rather official-looking men who were digging a very large hole in the ground. He asked them if the rumours were correct, that an airfield was destined to be built nearby. One of the men looked up at him and said, "We've never dug a hole for nothing yet." But Godfrey Godwin's late father, Francis, went one better.
My father was one of the first people who knew that it was coming here. He was on Paddington Station because my mother was a Londoner, and he started talking to this guy, and he asked him where he lived, and he said Lyneham in Wiltshire. He said, "I tell you, mate," he said, "within 6 months," he said, "they'll be building an airfield there." And he come back here and they all laughed at him. And sure enough, within six months, they'd started and they'd taken over the farms and all that and started building.
My earliest memories was probably just before the last war, basically.
Ray Cole.
I remember the camp being built, or rather looking across from the road and seeing burning the farm down. It was in the middle of the camp. Fry's LYNEHAM Court Farm, I remember that.
LYNEHAM Court was indeed a remarkable farm. It had the distinctive feature of a moat that surrounded the farmhouse itself. It was an early victim in the construction of what was to become RAF LYNEHAM. It's a farm that Anne Hall, originally from Fern Farm at Bradenstoke, remembers very well.
I used to go there to play tennis. They had tennis courts there. I used to go there to play tennis with their daughters. But then, of course, that was the first place to be wiped out, really.
With it, the lovely walks across to Catcombe Wood and Bluebell Wood all disappeared, and a road that Bill Hancock remembers linking Bradenstoke to Goatacre, Ewage Lane.
Why I can remember that, I don't know, because I would have been about 3 years old, but from some sticks in my mind that was being taken, yes, on the road. I think I'm right saying the road came out roughly at the Borough end of Bradenstoke, yeah.
You've got an old map you were showing me
Yes.
of LYNEHAM and Bradenstoke and the
Yes.
surrounding area, and LYNEHAM Court was quite a big prominent farm, wasn't
It looks
it?
big, yes.
Yes.
On the map, yes.
And then there was another farm which also went for the base, wasn't there?
That was Cranley Farm, where Mr Ludlow lived.
Bill Wheeler, mentioning there another LYNEHAM landmark that fell victim of the new airfield. We earlier met Neil Ludlow, who possesses what is thought to be the keystone of Bradenstoke Abbey. That other airfield victim is something with which he has strong links.
Grandfather used to farm Cranley Farm before it was the runway was here, and then it was compulsory purchased. He bought Fern Farm, I'm guessing in the 30s. He kept hold of 12 acres here, and it was a small holding. There was an Irish navvy working on the camp, and he basically pawned his shovel for some beer money, and he was never seen again, and I still have the shovel to this day.
But how did local farmers feel about being invaded and losing their land and, more importantly, their homes?
Well, I was too young. I was only a schoolgirl at that time. I was too young to have any particular feelings about that. But I think the farming fraternity rather resented the Air Force. The good land was taken up for a land. But of course, the aircraft have to land somewhere. So that was a bit pointless.
Come the airfield did, as did the war, and it too had a taste of enemy attack. One sunny summer's day, my grandparents, the Amors, noticed an aircraft with the very distinctive swastikas emblazoned upon it, droning overhead. Panic ensued when that aircraft dropped its load on LYNEHAM Airfield. Lives on the base were lost as a result. The windows in what is now Ray Cole's cottage, then my grandparents' home, all smashed, showering the sewing which lay in my mother's lap. But Ray himself also remembers another enemy bomb drop, this time on a nearby village beauty spot.
I don't know a lot of people know, but there is a big bomb crater over Bailey's Hill, which was 1940. Big bang about 8 o'clock in the evening, and the plane dropped this bomb. Of course, there was a searchlight upon Bailey's Hill over there in them days.
Did people think the base was going to go at the end of the war, or did they know it was going to become a bigger thing like it is now?
Well, I think before the war had completely finished, everyone had got used to it. It had sort of grown on us, you know.
The war ended, the RAF remained, and LYNEHAM, along with the aerodrome, started to expand. It was to change the appearance of the Church End area to the south of LYNEHAM more than any other part of the village, due largely to the building of the new Married Quarters. Bill Hancock.
Started those in the end of 46, and they were building them through that very bad winter in 1947. Lancaster Square was the first ones to be built.
Yes, the first ones was down on the left, Lancaster Square. That was the first ones, yeah, that was a field. Yeah, because we used to walk. Of course, the main footpath to Tottenham runs across there, through there to Tottenham. It's still connected now at the end, I believe.
because the field where Lancaster Square was, we played football. That was where we used as the football for the school. It wasn't a proper pitch, but it was the one we used for football. It was obviously much sleepier in early 40s right through till, well, about 47. But then obviously after the war it really started ballooning then, and the Murray quarters were gradually built till it was over 1,000 houses eventually, the Murray quarters.
Of course, Church End is so called because it's where St Michael and All Angels Parish Church is located. Placed there to not only serve Lyneham itself, but the surrounding villages of Bradenstoke-Tockenham and the small hamlet of Preston. The main route to Preston is, of course, Preston Lane, which is now the home of the large primary school and until recently the Naffy Supermarket building and St Joseph's Roman Catholic Church. I can remember those being built, having replaced some buildings that were previously a radio communications station for the RAF. On the corner of Preston Lane, just opposite the fish and chip shop, stands a building that means a lot to Ray Cole.
My parents and grandparents lived in the house which is now the hairdresser, which was a toll house at the road to Cowan. I remember my grandma had an old wicker chair, and it was a very sharp corner then, of course. It's not like it is now. The road come right in front of the house. Of course, the main thing down there was it was a lane. There was only 2 council houses. Matthews and Cook.
Well, my dad apparently helped to build RAF Lyneham.
Phyllis Ellis was actually born in one of those 2 houses in Preston Lane mentioned by Ray Cole. She was Phyllis Matthews, daughter of Stan and Alice. The large Matthews family were well known all around Lyneham.
About 9 boys and 3 girls.
Well, I seem to remember 2 of them were builders, weren't they?
Charlie, Cecil and Sid. They were all builders. I had a sister, Marion, which she worked on the camp in the Sally Ann, as they used to call it, the Salvation Army. And myself, I worked on the Naffy on the camp, not down Preston Lane. Well, it was a lovely little village. We used to go to Girl Guides. We had fun. We all met. Boys and girls. We went to Sunday school. I played the organ, which is not anymore now, the chapel that was in Preston Lane. That was right down, you go as far as Preston Lane as you can, and it was like a little tin chapel, but now it's completely gone.
The South View area of Lyneham is on the road that takes you towards Wootton Bassett, down a dip on a stretch of road known officially as the Folly, but locally as Frying Pan Bottom. Nearby is Farthing Lane that leads you to the Bailey's Hill beauty spot. Jennifer Bloxham was brought up in Farthing Lane, the daughter of local builder Lou Kenniston.
My father, Lou Kenniston, he married my mother, who was a marshal. And when we moved to Lyneham, Dad built the bungalow the other side of the field there, and it's got a yard with it. And he ran a building firm with Bill Marshall. You walk down to Bailey's Hill, and the other side of Bailey's Hill, you'll see a little gate, and that's Buttercup Lane. It goes right the way down the back to Buttercup Farm. Yeah. Of course, there used to be the toll house at the top of Farthing Lane. And it used to be the old police house. It's a little stone cottage with a thatched roof on it. They brought the cows and that up from Buttercup Farm. They had to pay a toll, I presume, to get through into Lyneham.
For many years I remember seeing a wooden board perched up in my grandparents' garage at what is now Ray Cole's house. It had strange writings on it with numbers. It was later that I learned that this was the toll board that gave all the rates payable to be able to drive sheep and cattle through Lyneham, and came from that toll house mentioned there by Jennifer Bloxham. The Amors were custodians of it until my grandmother handed it over to the parish in 1970. It's now on display in the Memorial Hall Library next to St Michael's Parish Church. But Jennifer herself remembers well how Lyneham developed during the 50s and 60s, particularly at Church End, where Lou Kenniston built 2 of the best remembered shops.
Father built Kenniston & Smith, the draper shop there, and the little bungalow next to it, which was my mother's bakery shop. And for many years we ran the bread and cake shop from there, and it was my two aunts, my father's sister and friend aunt, that ran Kennison Smiths. They worked in Dunnings of Maidstone for years, and so they had all the experience and everything, and then they wanted to sort of go out on their own and move out into the country, so Dad built this shop down there.
Church End really became the village's commercial centre, especially in the 1960s. The Tellings newsagent's shop moved to a new building around the corner. It eventually merged with Harold Leeds' small supermarket to become what is now Tesco. Opposite St Michael's Church is a stone cottage that was once a corner shop operated by my mother's cousin, Winnie Ovens, née Stickler. That was sold to the Curtin family, who developed it into a supermarket known as LYNEHAM Stores. It's now the Co-op. But life for me all started in September 1955 at what was then a relatively new council estate, post-war prefabs known as Airy Houses. St Michael's Close stands just off the Chippenham Road, and when my family and I moved out in 1965 when I was 10, Jennifer Bloxham, then cook, moved in.
I remember St Michael's Close. Years before that, we used to come and visit my grandparents, and I remember walking into the field here at the back with my grandfather, and they were building this house, and I remember Grandad saying, if these houses last 10 years, I'll eat my hat.
Jennifer's grandfather probably had good reason for thinking so. They were built right in the RAF flight path, and for many years aircraft skimmed the rooftops.
Well, we had the planes flying over the top of us and it didn't sort of bother us, but down there they didn't have them flying over, they flew around them.
Chuck Taylor. He and I have joint memories of growing up in St Michael's Close, his family having moved into number 1 opposite us in 1951.
When the Queen was crowned, that was in 1952, I was 3 years old, and I can remember they had a bonfire over Bailey's Hill, and fireworks and all that. And of course it was late in the evening, so we had to come home, and of course you could see Bailey's Hill from our place, and we used to go up. Mum took me up in the window to watch it all from there. But I can just about remember it. We always got quite a few friends from down the village, and they all sort of came in, but there was always a sort of an attitude of them and us.
Yes.
And you know, they used to go over Bailey's Hill and that, and we used to treat it as our own and go over there and sort of chase them off a bit. And vice versa when we went down there. But it was all good fun. It was kids' fun, wasn't it?
Yes, it was absolutely. Yeah. But I think the thing that amused me, Chuck, was that going back to those days, bearing in mind that it was their fathers that were working on those aircraft, and whenever they used to come up after school to play with us at St Michael's Close, an aircraft would come in low to land. They put their hands over their ears and sort of coil because of the noise and the fact that and duck as well. Mm. And we village kids looked at them as if to say, well, what's the problem with you? So we're so used to it. When I was a small boy living in that road, I can remember Farmer David Beer working in the large field at the end. When the Potter family took it over, trees were grubbed out and large wooden posts were erected, all in a sequence down that field heading towards Farthing Lane. These were for the new aircraft landing lights.
They're metal now, but when we moved into the bungalow, the other side of the field, my father built, Lou Keniston, and I remember sitting on the wall at the bottom of the garden watching the men dig the trenches for all the cables and that to put the poles up with.
But as the years went by, the RAF were as much a part of the village as the church itself. St Michael and All Angels found itself as the new station church, and after the last vicar, Mr St John, left, big changes took place. As Bill Hancock explains.
Obviously, Lyneham had got so large, well, it was the largest RAF base at that time, and they felt it was too much for the vicar to be doing it, so they would come to an agreement that the padres would be the priest in charge of the parish, which has not been done anywhere else. And of course, often they had an assistant chaplain as well, so there was normally 2 of them. They also done the same with the Methodists. They took over the chapel on the green, called it St Andrews.
One of Dad's projects that he had to do was go to a Withys farm at Tockenham, and he had to put in some troughs for the cattle. which meant digging up the farmyard. So he started digging up skeletons. And all work stopped, obviously, and archaeologists and everybody were brought in. And it turned out to be a row of Cromwell's soldiers. There must have been a battle over there around Tottenham Court. When I first came to Lyneham, it was a very sleepy little village. There was a lot of stone cottages with thatched roofs in different places. I mean, there was one up the end of St Michael's Close here, the Beers farmhouse.
Yes.
Mind you, they were chapel people. And every Sunday the piano was rolled out onto the front lawn and we had a service, you know. And Gerald Kane's farm at Barrow End at the top there.
Yeah.
There was a big stone house there, thatched roof. And she ran a grocery shop from it. And of course when I came here there were an awful lot of hangars in and around the village. There was one opposite Edmund's garage. It was made to look like a garage. It was disguised, yeah, and with cars out the front, and I think it had a petrol pump or something stood outside the front of it as well. But that was for Spitfires.
So, because it was a storage facility when the RAF first came, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
For many years, the RAF base was open to all. Like me, Chuck Taylor remembers the airfield's very own cinema, the Astra.
Yeah, do I? Yeah, I got kicked out of there once for going in underage. There you go.
I remember being taken there as a tiny tot to see, I think it was The Young Ones with Cliff Richard. First film I think I'd ever went to see.
Well, the first one I went to see was Davy Crockett.
Oh, Happy Days.
Oh, yeah, because you want everybody at that time, you had to go out and get a Davy Crockett suit, didn't you, and a gun?
Of course you did, yeah. It was essential.
It was.
But Chuck is a good example of how the RAF brought with it civilian employment. It's continued to give work to people all around the Lyneham area. We met Chuck's wife Babs earlier, the verger at the church. Had Chuck not gone to work on the base with his late father Fred, they may never have met.
But he used to be the head barman in the officers' mess. And just after I finished my apprenticeship, I went down there to work for a while, and my wife came down there, and I thought, I used to come in at the back of the bar to get cigarettes and all that, and I thought she was an officer. I thought, I cracked this one. Only trouble was, she wasn't an officer, she was an ordinary plod. But yeah, we've been married for 40 odd years now, so that worked out all right.
Excellent.
Yeah, but Dad also helped to build the place in the beginning. Well, he was a carpenter, and what he was referred to is a journeyman. I didn't work that out until sort of a few years ago when we were going through his paperwork and all that. But he was a carpenter on the camp, and he sort of while it was being built, and that was before the war. And then he joined the Marines, and he came back, went on the camp as a gardener. Then he injured his back he had a bit of an accident up there. Became a batman in the officers' mess, and then gradually worked up to actually being the head barman.
When Diana Hamlin first came to Lyneham 50 odd years ago and moved into her listed cottage on the green that she still lives in, she remarkably had no idea about what was actually attached to this seemingly sleepy farming village.
We came to live in Lyneham purely because of the house. We had friends that lived in Wiltshire, and we were visiting them. We loved the county as such after a very short time, and we were back from the United States, where we'd been living in Dallas in Texas, and the house appealed to us. Because of that, we bought it and came to live in Lyneham. After a very short time, because we were busy moving in any event, I walked up to the village and was somewhat amazed to find that there were a lot of people walking about in RAF uniforms. And it never occurred to us that this was an RAF station with a contingent of army as well. And I came back and I said to my husband, very strange thing happened out in the village. They got a lot of people in RAF uniforms up there. He said, I wonder why that is. I said, I got no idea. And of course, when you come to the village as such and come to live in the immediate village sector, unless you do walk up the road, you're not aware of it being an RAF station.
Quite well hidden, isn't it?
Well, it is, because you see there's no other access down in the village end. And so we lived with it quite happily, because even when we were living in Dallas at that time, we were pretty much on the runway of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. So the airplane noise didn't register with us at all. So we settled into Wiltshire, and I have to tell you that from the day we came here, we've had nothing but success.
Part of that success brought her the MBE. Once she knew that there was an RAF station nearby, she soon became involved.
I worked in the voluntary sector for SAFA for 25 years. I literally sort of fell into being a SAFA divisional secretary for North Wales, almost by accident, because the local doctor was retiring and his wife had done the work and they needed somebody to take it over. He seemed convinced that I was capable of doing it, even though I really knew at that time nothing whatsoever about SAFA as such. It could have been the South African Football Association for all I knew. But it was, at the same time, the sort of thing that I could link myself to, because I'd always done legal work when I was working. And so there's an awful lot of compassion in that type of work. So you can take on board people with difficulties. And I got to know the families very well, and because of that, I needed a certain amount of time spent with the families officer, which they had at LYNEHAM. And in those days, they didn't have social workers, professional social workers for the families. They had the families officer and a bit of potluck as to how you came out of it. And so over the years, I realised that LYNEHAM really needed its own professional branch, SAFA social worker.
Local businesses also benefited from the presence of RAF LYNEHAM. When I was a pupil at nearby Wootton Bassett Secondary School, it was a LYNEHAM company that had the job of transporting us to and fro each morning and afternoon. A company for which Jennifer Blotsam has personal memories.
Married William Cook, son of Henry Cook. And we ran Cook's Coaches for a number of years up there. And the only way we could stop Henry from driving coaches was I had to go out and get my PSV badge, and I drove coaches. I drove them for 25 years in and around LYNEHAM and different places.
Collecting school children and so on,
yeah. Cook's Coaches started in the 1930s. And they used to do a lot of what they call troop bashing, out through London and that. And I thoroughly enjoyed driving coaches. Quite an experience. Actually, I was the only woman coach driver around here for a long time. Coach driver.
As opposed to a bus driver?
Yeah.
Cook's Coaches were based just along from St Michael's Close, in a yard opposite to the cottage in Chippenham Road that's notable for its landing lights in the front garden. Ironically, that yard has another personal link for Jennifer in the name of the Hillier family.
Baker's Cottage was Hillier's, because Hillier's owned most of LYNEHAM for years. And of course they're part of my family anyway. The Hilliers, the Barbers, and the Kennistons and the Marshalls, we're all one big family, and as it is at the moment, I'm the only one left. Everyone's gone. Most of the Hillier family went to Australia and New Zealand, and all the rest have died. I've got a distant cousin that lives up in the bungalow, David Hillier. Apart from that, everybody's gone now. I'm the only one left.
Sharing my memories of Cook's Coaches and old Henry himself are brothers Phil and Lawrence Birchall. They own and run Lilybrook Estate, which really is a link between the two villages, being on the very cusp of LYNEHAM and Bradenstoke. We went to school together, but they've now inherited a Parkhome estate that had humble beginnings.
Well, a grandfather bought what's currently about a third of Lilybrook in 1926, and then and as a farmer, as a pig and poultry farmer, and Grant was born in the village of Bradenstoke. And when Dad came home after the war, he bought a adjoining piece of land, making what's now 2/3 of Lillybrook, and his farmed as pig and poultry farmers. And in the mid-60s, Mum had the idea of changing across to residential mobile home park, and over the next 5 or 6 years converted the farm across to the mobile home park. So that's our
And that was
brief
sort of
history.
just sort of basic caravans then, wasn't it, Lawrence? But it's changed a bit now, hasn't it?
Totally basic caravans, more like modern day holiday caravans. But now, of course, we've moved into homes which are bungalows, really.
With the sound of the last remaining Hercules aircraft preparing to take off in one direction and a stunning view across the Dauncey Vale in the other, the Birchall brothers told me about the field on Lillybrook Estate where we were stood having our chat. It's brought them recent recognition.
Yeah, that's correct, Jerry. We've won an award from the David Bellamy scheme, and what we've done is we've produced 300 metres of natural hedging. We've planted our bank up with trees and produced a small copse for wild animals, for nature. And we're learning all the time, to try and introduce wildflowers, which brings in the insects, which brings in the birds. It's all good for nature, and people love to see it.
That's amazing. Congratulations for that. Phil, you were telling me earlier on as we were walking over here that you've managed to reuse some of the stuff from the actual site in an eco-friendly way, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct, Joe. We've take things like the old concrete bases for the homes. When we take an old home off, they weren't built the same standards they're built nowadays, as Laurie was just saying. And so we have to take the old concrete base up and put a new base in. So the old base we take away, store in a pile, and then have a crusher come in, crush it down and have it reused to hardcore.
Living on Lillybrook Estate are two examples of the pull that Lyneham has had. Pat Child's first experience of the place was back in the 1970s.
I was married to someone in the army, and we were posted from York to Hong Kong. And so my first ever flight, my first ever going out of England was going to be to the Far East. And I came to Lyneham, sort of by train and bus and that. And I just thought what an incredibly calm place it was in what was then quite a hectic part of my life, going half the way around the world and sort of with a 2-year-old and sort of all my bags that would sort of see me through for the next 2-3 months, whatever I wanted. And I just liked it so much, but sort of 5 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, of being bussed over to the plane on the runway down there and flying out. I just sort of thought it was such an incredible place, and yet there was nothing more to it than the peacefulness.
And just around the corner is Doug Ellis. Not only did he do his national service at Lyneham, but met his future wife. We met her earlier, the former Phyllis Matthews.
Well, I think Wiltshire on the whole is a beautiful county. Lyneham situated in a nice spot. You've got Wootton Bassett just a few miles up the road, and Swindon's not all that far away. You've got all the facilities and all the amenities like. And I think that Lyneham's a lovely little village. As many villages around here, they're all very nice.
But back to Lyneham's past. Henry Cook isn't the only memorable character to have lived and worked in this rather special village. There have been many, like, for example, Diana Hamlin's former next-door neighbour.
Mrs. Jones and the Jones family. Wonderful Wiltshire family. I lived next door to them for 30 years. She was Mrs. Blunt, really. She said what she thought. She was really a superwoman. And her husband was a wonderful sort of, he worked, I believe, on the camp, but he was farm type, more agricultural type. Wonderful village people. Now, when we came here to live, I think people wondered, because I mean, even though I've been here 50 years, I'm still, to the village point of view, very much a foreigner. And I think I will always continue to be so. Now, Mrs. Jones and I got along fine. And so she said to me one day, people asked me how I thought I was going to get on with my new neighbours. And I said I thought I'd get on with them just fine, because you look like the sort of people who mind your own business. And she, you know, they had their life, we had ours. They were real village people. She was the sort of village character that always had not quite the right word, but it was near enough.
Yeah.
She used to discuss the different brands of tea with me from time to time. And she said, see, I like that typhoid tea.
Sylvia Dudman, she lived opposite.
Yes.
Yeah, and her father, the captain, as we called him. Of course, Sylvia ran the Girl Guides in Lyneham at the
I seem to remember she was a bit like a sergeant major type lady, wasn't she? Very forthright.
Yes, we used to like to watch her march down through the village, because she always arrived at the village hall before the rest of the troop.
Jennifer Bloxham. Her husband Andy also came to the village due to being an RAF child. He went to school there, and like many, he stayed and worked.
I didn't start on the council until that hot summer of '76, believe it or not. I started grass cutting there, waiting for a position to become available on the plumbing side or the building side as such. And I then went and worked on the council grass cutting all down around Chippenham. No means of fit in my life. Walking behind lawnmowers and that all day. I got promoted up into a supervisory position as a surveyor. I used to live down on the banks then, which is just going out of Lyneham. The big white house it was, number 3 of the banks I used to live at. We used to have a good time at it, working on the married quarters. As I say, being a plumber as such. So my apprenticeship, which went on for about 4 or 5 years now, I think it was. And I remember, was it Malson Road being built? They weren't built by Rendals, they were built by Langs. But I think they were built on the wrong side of the road, actually.
Because they're actually on the perimeter of the base, aren't they?
Yeah, they should have been over on where the army side is, 47 Dispatches now.
What they used to call B-site, wasn't it?
Yeah, B-site as such, yeah.
As we've already heard, Lyneham lost several notable farms and cottages to make way for the building of its new airfield at the end of the 1930s. Church Farm, which stands next to what was Kenniston and Smith, was also purchased by the then Air Ministry. But the family who had lived there and farmed it for generations, the Mifflins, continued to do so until the MOD sold it at the end of the 70s. There used to be a pond outside it which was later filled. Miss Muriel Mifflin was one of my mother's teachers at the old village school, and my mother was named after her.
Out of the blue, a guard came with a postcard. It was a postcard showing the stained glass window from Bedford, showing John Bunyan.
Jackie Mann, 77 years old, is leaving the aircraft now. Beside him, Sunny Mann, she's grasping a bouquet of flowers. She's pointing, she's spotted
From
someone
being
in
a
the
peaceful
crowd.
farming village that nestled quietly in the North Wiltshire countryside, Lyneham became one of the most important and most famous places in the world, especially in recent years with the return of Beirut hostages Terry Waite, Jackie Mann and John McCarthy. But it too has had its fair share of notable villagers. Elton John, before he became famous, lived in Lyneham, being an RAF son, and Chuck Taylor knew him quite well. Joe Russell farmed Pound Farm on the Green before the Webb family took it over, and Joe's son is Dudley Russell, husband of poet Pam Ayres. Pound Farm itself gave its name to a new development of houses in the early 1960s that stand next to it. Pound Close also has a prehistory, having been known as the Waffrey. Bill Hancock.
Well, it was huts and it was military, and majority of it was WAFs there, that is correct, yes. And I'm pretty sure I'm saying for a short time there was Americans there during the war. And then after that, it was used as a hostel for men that were working building the Murray quarters and on the camp for a few years. Yeah, I mean, the Pound Close itself is where all that was, and Webb's Court, of course, is land that's been built on in addition to that.
By the Webb family
Yeah.
from Pound Farm?
Yeah.
There was always the Hancock family.
Mm-hmm.
They were village people, and they still are, still very much involved with the village. The other people that lived in St Michael's Close, there were a lot of people there, and some of the family are still about. And even though they're built council houses at the back, I imagine a big percentage of them are occupied by descendants of the original people that lived in Lyneham. It's always stayed a very close community.
Church End remains a busy part of the village with its various businesses and large primary school, at which my father Roger Hughes was caretaker for 28 years. And for the past 20 years, Marcia Collett has been a florist, situated next to the Memorial Hall Library. She's been involved in village life, which includes that school.
I took on the shop in 1991. It was an old butcher's shop. Mr. Potter, the butcher, had it. And then we turned it into a flower shop, and we've been trading now for the last 20 years. I was a governor at the school for 8 years and chair for 4 years, and I actually saw it through its amalgamation when it became a primary school. So it was quite sort of testing times for staff, but as usual, the staff rallied round and coped amazingly. Again, the spirit of those staff, they're very resilient, and they, as long as we can have families here in Lyneham, there will be a school.
But the most recent task that has brought both Lyneham and nearby Wootton Bassett global attention has sadly been those repatriations, something that Marcia Collett has also been involved with.
Every time there's a repatriation, we provide flowers for the Chapel of Rest. So we do a fresh arrangement of flowers, and that goes up in the morning, so the families have got somewhere quiet to have some reflection time, and obviously be together at their hour of need. And yes, having a husband in the forces, as you can imagine, it's very poignant every time we do an arrangement to think, oh, that could be for one of myself, family, or one of my staff, because I do employ some local people that are military families as well. Although we don't do it on mass, we don't have as many people here in Lyneham as we do in Wootton Bassett. Every shop stands out, all the shops stand out, and again, exactly the same as Wootton Bassett, the village comes to a standstill and everybody stands out and pays their respects.
And the bell tolls at St Michael's.
And the bell tolls as well, yes.
And villager born and bred, Godfrey Godwin, knows all about that.
I've done most of the repatriation, tolling the bell. When I can't do it, Dave Webber does it, and before that, the late John Simpson done it with me.
How did you feel about doing that? How were your feelings?
I wish I didn't have to do it, I must admit.
Yeah.
And it's such a, makes you wonder why it's all necessary, really and truthfully.
As the repatriations come to an end, RAF Lyneham prepares to say goodbye.
There's been an enormous amount of notice given for RAF Lyneham closing. It wasn't a sudden decision. We've all had time to get used to it. And in addition to that, it wasn't the sort of decision that was made lightly, I'm sure. And you can't argue with whatever happens. We got to bear in mind, RAF Lyneham is going to Oxford. Lyneham is not moving from Wiltshire.
In the late 1930s, its arrival had marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new one for what had been a sleepy, unknown farming village in North Wiltshire under the squireship of the Walker-Heneage family, whose memorial sits proudly on the north wall of St Michael and All Angels Parish Church. Now the base's future is certain, and a new era is about to begin for the village of Lyneham, where I was born and bred.
We're ringing the bells because as a village and as an RAF station we're overjoyed to see the release of Terry Waite, and we give thanks to God through our action of ringing the bells, and we celebrate his homecoming again through our action of ringing the bells.
Here we are.
Get ready?
No.
Okay, now.
Look to, so let's go. We're going to ring now. Just sit still.